Mark Lazarus, Tom Hitchcock, how are you?
Hey Tom, how you going?
Yes, not too bad. Cannot complain. So, you and I don't know each other. I think we're connected on LinkedIn. It'll be
Yep.
the extent of our knowledge of each other. But yeah, I'm super keen to hear a bit about you and your story, Mark.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for inviting me on your podcast. And yeah, you feel free to jump in at any time. I can certainly talk. I'm a lawyer after all. So I'll give you a bit of background about me, and a bit of my journey and what I've been through. I'm the director of Lazarus Legal. I'm a law firm in Sydney, New South Wales, Bondi Junction area. I've got a team of about 8 lawyers and growing. I work primarily with startups, creatives, fast-moving consumer good brands, so FMCGs, food, beverage, health, wellness, beauty, leisure, and tech as well. So it's quite a niche, but also diverse area that I work in. How that came about is, and I'm not your typical suit and tie lawyer, far from that. Been there, done that. I was actually a barrister at the New South Wales bar for several years, and not a barista that makes coffee. But you'd know that, being from the UK, a barrister is, the advocate of the court that wears a suit and a tie and a wig and a gown and, argues cases all day. But prior to that, I actually went traveling in 2006 during the Football World Cup to the UK. And at that point, I met my wife in London, and she couldn't resist moving back to Australia with me, although, she probably regrets it now. And she moved to Australia. We spent a couple of years here, and then she was like, "You've now got to come back over to the UK and get to know my life and how I live and my family, etc." So we did a bit of country hopping. We moved back to London around 2008, and I requalified as a lawyer over there and worked in a media entertainment law firm. In fact, one of my biggest clients was Paul McCartney. I had to, work on an addendum to his will and then deliver his original will to the executor of his estate in central London, which was pretty crazy to think I had Paul McCartney's will in my backpack. But then the GFC hit, the global financial crisis, and I was an Australian lawyer trying to make it as a lawyer in the UK. Found myself out of work, and I was like, what am I going to do? So I studied to become a barrister whilst living in London, and then flew out to Australia to sit the bar exams. My wife stayed in London while I kind of came out and just did some studying on my own for about 6 weeks. And then after the last bar exam, I hopped on a flight and went back to London. And believe it or not, it was that during that first week of being back in London, after not having been able to find a job for a while, that I landed an interview with this small outfit, Monster Energy, as you know. So probably the biggest, one of the biggest energy drink brands on the planet, arguably even bigger than Red Bull when it comes to volume, etc. So landed an interview. I remember going to Uxbridge in London for that interview, and I rocked up in a full suit and a tie into Monster's offices, where you had the marketing department driving go-karts and the MD in jeans and a t-shirt, and I felt very overdressed for my audience. But I hit it off and ended up doing coming in as the sole legal counsel for Monster for Europe, and absolutely loved that role. Did it for 6 months, but said to them, look, if I pass the bar exams, I'm moving back to Australia to pursue a career as a barrister. And they were like, well, we don't even know if we need legal counsel presence in Europe. Everything is generally run by the US. So we'll test you, you test us. Anyway, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, basically. About 3 weeks out from me saying I was leaving, only for me to turn around and say, I'm sorry that the ship has actually sailed. Like, literally, figuratively, all my stuff was on the ship back to Australia. My wife and I were packing up to come back. So no matter what they presented, I turned it down. And I went from, again, riding go-karts in Monster's marketing department to being a barrister at the New South Wales bar, sitting in a library in the city in Sydney, reading 800-page judgments all day long. I thought I was going to do something to myself that I shouldn't be doing. And I did that for 3 years, and then kind of got to a point where I can't do this anymore. I want back in at Monster, and they were like, well, we're not going to have you back in Australia as a sole legal counsel when we don't have, presence in much bigger markets in Asia and Asia Pacific. So I was like, no. But my MD called me up and said, my old boss, and said, we want you back in London. And my wife was pregnant with our second son at the time. And so we moved back to London in 2013, and I went in as the legal director for Monster across Europe, and looked after territories and everything to do with energy drinks and can size and sugar, and meeting with metrology and standards departments, and on all things to do with energy and caffeine and sugar and everything else. And in between, we built up a team, and I was drafting athlete promotion endorsement agreements and brand partnership agreements and sponsorship agreements and stuff day in, day out, and absolutely loved it. Fast forward that, I did that for probably 5 years, from around 2013 till 2017, and that's post my initial stint. And sorry, not till 2017, it was till 2013 till 2019. And then it was around April 2019 when we decided to move back to Australia, and I decided, I loved Monster, but I wanted to kind of come back and do my own thing. I wanted to bring up my family here, and went into a family firm, Lazarus Legal, started by my old man, and I decided I wanted to do things the way I did them at Monster. So not traditional suit and tie firm. I want to work with clients in the energy drink space, in the beverage space, in the alcohol space, in pet space, beauty space, tech space. And so I started carving a niche out as that, as the kind of external in-house counsel or advisor on tap to the brands that I work with. And now, fast forward again another 5 or 6 years, and Lazarus Legal's has been built to a team of around 8, and I'm constantly hustling, working as the external in-house lawyer or advisor on tap for various different brands. So it's been a journey. Had a lot of obstacles along the way, and continue to have obstacles. It's building a team and everything around leadership and being a better boss and being a better mentor and being a better business owner and running the business and networking and scaling. We've brought in a business development manager as well, which has been quite important. I think he managed to connect me with you. I love doing speaking gigs and podcasts and what have you, and that's something I certainly want to do more of. One thing you did say is be vulnerable, be open. That's important, and so I will be on this call. I actually moved back to Australia, and it's pretty hard because my wife's entire family are in the UK, and we always said that coming back here we would make room to go back to London, at least twice a year, etc. And we managed to do that even with 3 young kids, but it's had its challenges. And then when we moved back here in 2019, it turned out that within a few weeks, a few months of being back here, I woke up one morning with a blocked ear, and my wife was actually back in London. She went back to visit shortly after we got back, and she said to me, it's probably nothing, just take some Sudafed or something, it's probably just a head cold. And I did, and it didn't clear. And then a week later, I was like, I'm going to go see a doctor, and I went to see a doctor, and they checked me out and looked into my ear and said there's nothing there, and again, why don't you just take some Sudafed? It's probably just a head cold. And I did that again, and nothing seemed to fix it. Still felt like I had water trapped in my ear and it was blocked. So I said I want another opinion, which I got, and again the same response. And I said, this is just not good enough. I want to see an ENT, an ear, nose, and throat specialist. And I went to see an ENT, and they did ran some tests, and immediately they said that you've got some nerve damage to your ear. We'd like to run some tests, give you some prednisone, which is a corticosteroid, a steroid. And just on the safe side, we'd like you to go get an MRI. So I did that. I went the next day and did what everybody does, and Dr. Googles the scenarios. And the next day I opened my email. I'd asked the scanning place, or whatever you call it, to send the results to me, not to my doctor, which was something I shouldn't have done. And opened it up, and what I had Googled was actually what I had. I was diagnosed with what is called an acoustic neuroma. Scientific term is called a vestibular schwannoma, or for you and me and everybody else listening, it's a benign brain tumor that grows on your cranial nerve. It affects your hearing, your balance, and your facial nerve. And basically a mass. We all have these Schwann cells that grow and multiply and then break down and then grow and multiply and break down. And one in, I think, 100,000 people end up having a malfunction where the cells just keep growing and it forms a mass, like a tumor, and it starts to encroach and get bigger and bigger in a very small area, to the extent that if it gets too big and pushes on your brainstem, you will not be around anymore. That being said, these tumors only grow like a half a millimeter a year. So the chances are that I had it for 10 or 15 years prior. And it was so small that I never ever noticed anything. But then maybe it was the plane pressure, because I ended up meeting my wife on that trip in London, and then I came back on my own while she stayed on for a few more weeks. Maybe something triggered it, and the tumor started pressing on a nerve, and that's why I could feel it. So the options were to what is known as watch and wait. You do nothing, see if it stops growing, and then you just go on with your life and happy days. Or you could have what is known as, there's different forms of surgery. It's a 10 to 12 hour op that goes straight through. They destroy all hearing, balance, etc. And there's a risk of taking that tumor off the nerve and destroying any of the nerves. You can have facial palsy for the rest of your life, and your eye swoops and your mouth can't shut properly, and it's not pleasant. Or there was a treatment called gamma knife radiation, which is a radiation therapy where they basically bolt a frame to your head and you have radiation targeted at the tumor. So unfortunately, I did watch and wait for 6 months, and the tumor grew. And so I had two options: surgery or radiation surgery. And I spent a lot of money meeting with surgeons all over Australia and the UK, and spoke with surgeons in the US. And the funny thing was that a lot of the surgeons in the UK and Europe were all for gamma knife radiation, whereas a lot of the surgeons here were all for proper surgery, get the tumor out. Problem with this type of tumor is that the surgery is not a fix. It actually makes things worse, because it's a very long surgery, it's a long recovery, you lose your balance, you lose your hearing. There's a chance, I wouldn't say it's very high, but there is a chance, depending on the size of the tumor, that you will get that paralysis, at least for 6 months, until the nerve heals, and if they destroy it, forever. Whereas all the surgeons and neurosurgeons in the UK and Harley Street, etc., were all for, like, someone your age, etc., we would only go gamma knife. It's like a 45-minute procedure, and it has a 93% success rate. So the problem was, because I was quite young at the time, we just don't know. In 20, 30, 40 years, there's not enough data to say what may be the outcome at that stage, although there hasn't been anything to be concerned about, like it transforming to a malignant tumor, etc. So fast forward, when I was told that it had grown and I had to do something about it, because gamma knife, you only have a limited window of time before the tumor gets too big, and then you can't do it. And after spending a lot of money on opinions, and I guess they're just medical opinions, but at the end of the day, they're opinions, so you have to go with your gut. I decided to go with gamma knife, which was done at Macquarie University Hospital. And yeah, I bolted a frame onto my head, went into a machine. Unlike an MRI where you've got machine gun sounds, it was very peaceful and quiet. I'd had a local anesthetic, my head had ballooned out, with all the anesthetic, and this frame was bolted to your head to lock you into the machine. the choice of music they played was Michael Bublé. I don't mind Bublé, but and then I'm sitting, Have I Met You Yet was playing in the background for 45 minutes while I was getting these rays of targeted radiation to the tumor. And look, I'm very, very thankful that 2000 and when was it? Yeah, it was. I think it was 2019 as well. Several years on, I'm I started going for MRIs every 6 months, and then 12 months, and 18 months, and it's been stable ever since. And lost a lot of hearing in this year, but I didn't have to go through surgery, and I've come out to be a bit of a tumor warrior on the other side. So I don't really talk about it much. I certainly don't let it affect my business. No one would know in my business, and I'm completely fine for people to know about it, which is why I'm sharing the story. No one, I don't really tell people. I have lost significant amount of hearing in this right ear. So when I go out for dinner, I do tell people, particularly if I'm going to a noisy restaurant, to where to place myself. But yeah, that was a real struggle. And I guess the reason I'm telling you this is because it kind of all happened, in the height of a change. When we moved back to Australia, I was coming in to basically go from everything cushy, having my wife's support, being in a good job, the big multi-national corporation like Monster, to trialing it on my own, to then, literally coming back, my wife not having her family support. We were renting and trying to find our feet and where we're going to live. Then only we had two kids at the time, two boys. We've since had a bit of a gap, and we've now got a beautiful daughter who's just started kindergarten. So we're very grateful for that. But yeah, it was a really challenging time. My wife stood by me relentlessly, and was my rock throughout it. And we came out the other side, and I slowly, started to build and grow my firm to a team, as I said, now of around 8 people. But it comes down to a lot of resilience, and there's a lot of difficult times out there at the moment for many people, startups, founders, people that are in business that have lost jobs. That we've got a crazy world we're living in now, with leadership everywhere, and it's been a challenge. But I firmly believe that if you kind of really believe in what you're doing, you put in the hard yards and the grind and the hustle, which is what we do at my firm, that you'll come out on top in the end. So that's a bit of a snapshot of my life in the last several years, in the last 6 or 7 years, along with what I'm doing now. So
appreciate that. Listen, there's essentially lots to unpack there, but I appreciate you sharing the more vulnerable components. As you know, my sentiment is everything's about authenticity. People can sniff anything that's disingenuous a mile away, and that wasn't the case with this. It's good that you shared that, and I'm grateful for that. I'm pleased that you had the support network around you to work through it, and it had some positive outcomes. I am curious on a couple of things. I'm curious as to why you think, what your opinion is, why the opinions were different between UK and Australia on the advice.
It wasn't just about the UK and Australia. It was about I booked appointments with neurosurgeons and surgeons. So I booked with specialist surgeons that did Gamma Knife, and specialist surgeons that did surgery for this type of tumor. Look, UK and Europe are obviously much bigger markets, so there's when I say markets, I'm talking like a startup lawyer, much bigger populations, right? So, they would obviously have more of these types of patients, more people getting acoustic neuromas at a younger age, etc. And therefore, their advancement in Gamma Knife as opposed to Australia. There's only 2 places, I think, even now in Australia that do Gamma Knife. One's at Macquarie University Hospital and one's in Brisbane. So I just think that there wasn't enough volume here to be doing Gamma Knife. Gamma Knife had only kind of opened here in Australia very shortly after I had it done. And yet in Europe, in certain parts of it, I think it was Sweden or somewhere, that they've been doing it for years and years and years. So, but everybody, it doesn't really matter if you're a doctor or a lawyer, an accountant, right? And, you know, marketing or agents or whatever it may be. Like, if you're a specialist in what you do, you believe in what you do. So you're going to see somebody that's pro-surgery. They're going to say, get the thing out, right? It's in your head. It's better to have it out of your head, right? And, you know, you'll go on to live a happy life. Whereas Gamma Knife would say, well, it's in your head, but it's not causing you any significant damage, but it could if it gets bigger. But if we've got a process that is non-invasive, that literally, you know, can kill it and even make it shrink a bit, without actually having to go in with an actual knife and cut into your brain, why would you go that route, you know? And so they both had very convincing arguments, and unfortunately, no one can look into a crystal ball and say what your outcome will be. And many people go Gamma Knife route and it's not successful. And I still panic every single time I go for that MRI, you know, and think like, has it grown? Am I going to have to go for surgery? And my wife's way more optimistic than me. She looks at it as like, you know, it was a cure. You're cured, move on. And I look at it like, well, it was a temporary fix and I'm just waiting for that other, for it to come back and poke its head again in a while. And so it's a mindset thing. And every time I get so freaked out 2 days or 3 days before, and I even get her to come with me to the appointment because I'm so nervous, because I've got to go through an MRI, etc. again, she always says to me, like, you're going to be fine. Don't worry. It's all good. And, you know, and I'm like, how do you know? She says, I just know. And like, and most of the time she does. And I always hope that she won't get it wrong one day. But yeah, in a long-winded response to your question, that's why it's not that one's better than the other. And for anyone that is listening who has got an acoustic neuroma, I'm not advocating that you go Gamma Knife if it's not right for you. You have to make your own informed decision with your own medical team. And then it comes down ultimately to a gut feel and decision. And my gut feel was I didn't want to go through the surgery, and this seemed like a really good option for me. And so far it's been the best decision, you know, I've ever, besides marrying my wife, I guess, it's probably the best decision that I've ever made in my life in terms of
That's
what
good.
I did.
That's good. I think she's doing a good bit of balancing for you, which is handy. And you did say that you made a point of not letting it affect other things. And the assumption to that is that you're not letting it affect anything in a negative manner. Okay. But were there any opportunities where it had a positive impact on business or your outlook for your kids or whatever?
Yes and no. Like, it certainly is something that I'm always reminded of, because I've got this constant pressure in this ear 24/7. Like, I just want to kind of pop it, like when you get off the plane and your air pressure's imbalanced and you want to pop it, but you can't. So it's always there, and some days it's very, very intense. I guess it has taught me to be more resilient and taught me to not sweat the small stuff, although, you know, I still probably do. But it also does make me stop and think how grateful I am in the fact that, like, if you're going to get a tumor, a brain tumor, you want to get an acoustic neuroma because it's a benign brain tumor, and that's the best brain tumor you can have, or one of the best, I believe, right? If it was a malignant tumor, I, you know, would have been history many years ago. So from that perspective, you've got to look and say, well, you know, everybody's going to go through life and get their fair share of issue, whether it's health, business, relationships. Everyone's going to go through something in their lives, and I guess it's just the way you kind of deal with it that is most important. And I've kind of channeled that, you know, that this adversity into to trying to be a better person, to build, to grow in my firm, in my personal life, etc. And also to know when you need to get support and help, and reach out in certain aspects of your life, whether it's in coaching, whether it's in mentorship, whether it's in, seeing somebody about your marriage or your relationship or your mental health or whatever it is. All of that kind of stuff is super important. And I definitely do feel like I have started to become more accountable for my own actions. I can be very quick to jump on things and act certain ways, and and a lot of the time not admit when I'm wrong. But I've really learned over the years to kind of take a step back and analyze my own actions, and then to replay them, and then to work out how I would do things differently on the next occasion. Because if you take it back to my business, and that's working with founders and startups and giving them all that legal advice and support, every successful startup fails, and it's that failure that makes them learn and grow and dig in deep to continue to build business and to be successful. It's not those startups that just get everything right perfectly, and there are some, but most of the time, businesses go through hurdles, ups and downs, and they have to pivot and adapt and change. And I guess that's what I'm always trying to do.
I love that. And as we sort of bring this episode to a close, it threads the needle nicely back into your business, which it says a lot about your DNA and what you bring out to the world. And you've almost set us up for another podcast episode, because talking about failure in business, the innovation, and I love that term. Every successful startup is a failure. I might need to borrow that one off you.
And absolutely you can, and sometimes a failure is a success, right? Yeah. Because the failures lead to success, and if you don't learn, you learn from that failure, so that you don't do it again, or you learn, and every step takes you further. So yeah, by all means, use it.
Yeah, so no, I love that. So just as we wrap up then, I'd like to know, I think I know, but it's probably best to share it on here, who your ideal client is. So if someone's listening to this, they want to bring some business your way, what would their dynamic be? And also, how should they contact you?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So just on Lazarus Legal, so I work with a lot of startups and scale-up businesses. So I work with startups in, I guess, as I said, food, beverage, health, wellness, beauty, leisure, and tech, from infancy, from day one to much larger businesses as well. So anyone that's in that space would be an ideal client that's looking to grow and wants to protect their legal, whether they need shareholders agreements or trademarks or services agreements or manufacturing, distribution, supply, or stock option plans or terms and conditions for their website. All that stuff is what I do. Employment contracts, you name it. But I also work with bigger clients, venture capital funds, corporate advisory firms, where we're dealing with M&A deals, mergers and acquisitions, and buy-sell agreements, share purchase and asset agreements, and of course joint ventures and collaborations. So I deal with that, and again I act as your advisor on tap. So we work on fixed fees, we work on project basis, I work on flexible monthly retainers. I never lock anyone into something they cannot get out of. I'm super stand behind transparency, honesty, and trust. That is a key the requirement with anyone I work with, is transparency and honesty. Lazarus Legal is www.lazarus, Lazarus legal.com.au is my website. My email is mark, M-A-R-K, at lazaruslegal.com.au. And they can also reach me on my mobile. If anybody is interested, they can email me and I can give them my contact details. I'm very, very giving of my time to clients and potential clients. So I'm not really charging any fees for an initial consultation, but if anyone listening is genuinely interested in learning more about my firm, or what I do, or even wants to just talk to me about my personal journey, both in terms of building my business and my personal health journey and my relationship with my wife and my kids, I'm more than happy to share.
No, I appreciate that. It's very commendable. So thank you for your time, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was great. And yeah, happy to have that second podcast when you're ready.
I'll hold you to that. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
Thank you for watching this episode. I hope that you did enjoy it, had lots of takeaways from it. As before, please subscribe below so you can keep on top of any new releases we have. And also, if you would like to have your story told, just reach out with me and I'd love to give you that platform. My best email address is tom@purplepatchconsulting.com. Thank you.